Good morning, my dears. I am Gertrude Miller. I am 78 years old now, but today I will tell you a story I have kept inside my heart for almost 50 years. It is a story that began with a simple, ordinary day. Yet that day changed everything about who I was, who I became, and how I survived. Before I begin, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Grandma's Diary, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. It helps me keep sharing my stories with you. Now, let me take you back to 1969. The world outside was full of chaos. The Vietnam War was raging, civil rights marches filled the streets. But in our small town in Virginia, life felt slow, quiet, and safe. Or at least that's what I believed. I was 29 years old. I had been married to Anthony Miller for 10 years. People in town said we were the perfect couple. Anthony worked as the head accountant at the only bank. He was always dressed in clean suits and shiny shoes, polite to everyone, respected everywhere he went. I was the quiet, devoted wife who kept our home warm and welcoming. We had two children, Michael, 8 years old, book smart and curious, and Teresa, 6 years old, full of drawings and bright colors. To everyone who saw us, we were the picture of a happy family. Every morning I woke up before everyone. I baked bread, brewed coffee, dressed the children for school, and waved goodbye from the front porch. Anthony always sat with his newspaper, sipping his coffee, looking like a man in control of life. After they left, I cleaned, I cooked, I sewed for a few ladies in town. My mother had taught me sewing when I was young. A woman needs a skill so she's never helpless, she used to say. I never imagined that advice would one day save me, but behind the perfect picture, there were cracks. Anthony was affectionate when people were around, but cold and distant when it was just us. He traveled often, especially on the first Thursday of each month. Whenever I asked about those trips, he grew angry. "You have a roof over your head and food on the table," he once told me sharply. "You don't need to know more than that." I told myself it was normal. Maybe men were just like that. Maybe a good wife stayed quiet. Everything changed on a quiet Sunday, August 17th, 1969, my mother's birthday. The children were away at their grandmother's house. Anthony had left early, saying he had to finish paperwork at the bank. I was home alone with a terrible migraine that felt like knives in my skull. The herbal teas my mother taught me to make didn't help. I knew Anthony kept strong painkillers in his office, a room we were not supposed to enter. Every man needs his own space, he always said. But that day, pain was stronger than fear. I stepped into the office for the first time. The room was dark and smelled of tobacco, old paper, and his special cologne. A large wooden desk stood under the window. Books lined the walls, though I doubted he ever read them. I opened the top drawer. Pens, paper, small items, and the medicine I was looking for. Suddenly, the migraine made me dizzy. I reached for the bookshelf to steady myself. Books shifted, and one heavy leather-bound Bible, a family heirloom Anthony proudly displayed, slid out and fell with a thud. It opened on the floor, its yellowed pages rustling, and from between those pages, a small folded note slipped out. At first I wanted to put it back. Anthony hated when anyone touched his things, but something about that note called to me. My hands shook as I unfolded it. 7 words written in the familiar handwriting of Edward, Anthony's best friend and the bank manager. If she discovers the truth, kill her. For a second, the world stopped moving. My heart raced. My breath caught in my throat. Who was she? Was it me? What truth? Why would my husband's closest friend write something like that and hide it inside a Bible in our home? The migraine vanished. Fear replaced it. My legs felt weak, so I sat in Anthony's leather chair, clutching the note. After a few long moments, I carefully folded it back, placed it between the Bible's pages, and returned everything as it was. I took the painkillers, drank some water, and tried to look calm. But inside, something cracked forever. That night, I acted normal. I served dinner, listened to the children's stories, smiled at Anthony's jokes. But a new voice had awakened inside me, one that said, "Be careful. Pretend. Watch." I knew then, if this note meant what I feared, confronting him could be dangerous. I would investigate quietly. The next days became an act. Breakfast at dawn, children ready for school, house shining. But while I smiled and baked bread, I was studying Anthony. Every small thing, the way he locked his desk when leaving, the way he hushed his voice on the phone, became suspicious. I noticed details I had never seen before. A week later, while ironing his suits, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket from a jewelry store in Richmond, an expensive diamond engagement ring. The price was 3 times my monthly household budget. My heart dropped. Anthony had never bought me such jewelry. And there was a card with an address in Richmond. My perfect husband was buying a ring for someone else. I made excuses to visit Richmond, buying fabric for my sewing, visiting a sick cousin. On my third trip, I found the address. It was a lovely house in an elegant neighborhood. Outside, a neighbor was watering her garden. I asked casually who lived there. "Oh, that's Marianne," she said cheerfully. "A lovely young teacher. Poor dear, expecting a baby. Her fiancé only visits once a month, on Thursdays. They'll marry once his divorce is done." Divorce. Thursday visits. My stomach twisted. The fiancé was Anthony. The ex-wife they spoke of was me. I drove home numb. My marriage was a lie. My husband was preparing a new life with a younger woman, a baby on the way, while I cooked his dinners and raised our children. But that wasn't the worst part. Through quiet talks with the bank's new secretary, I learned Anthony and Edward were planning something huge, a massive transfer of $500,000 for the town's new textile factory. The timing matched Anthony's next big trip. My gut turned cold. This was no simple affair. They were going to steal the money and disappear. Suddenly, that chilling note made sense. If she discovers the truth, kill her. Anthony and Edward weren't just betraying me. They were planning a crime. And if I knew too much, I might not survive. I remembered a strange key I had once seen in Anthony's shaving kit. He'd said it was for an old bank file. I searched while he was away, inside drawers, pockets, even a false book safe. At last I found it, hidden in a fake hollow book labeled Business Ethics. The irony made me want to scream. The key opened a small, locked metal box hidden deep in our wardrobe. Inside were tickets to Argentina for Anthony Miller and Marianne Olivia, fake IDs, and bundles of love letters. The latest letter read, "My love, only 2 weeks left until we're together forever. The baby's crib is ready. Be careful with the final details of the plan. As Edward says, if she finds out, you know what to do. Soon we'll be the family dreamed of." Marianne, my hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the box. 10 years of marriage, 2 children, a home I built with love, and my husband was ready to erase me. Worse, if I became a problem, he might have me killed. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat on the bedroom floor for a long time, tears drying on my face. Something inside me shifted that night. The obedient wife was gone. The woman sitting there was terrified, but also fiercely determined. I would not be a victim. I would not let him destroy me or leave my children penniless and motherless. I had 2 weeks until the big heist. 2 weeks to create my own plan. That night, while Anthony slept peacefully beside me, unaware, I stared at the ceiling and made silent promises. I would protect my children. I would survive. And somehow I would stop him. The storm had begun, and I knew I could not run. I had to fight, quietly, smartly, without tipping him off. That night, while Anthony slept peacefully beside me, unaware, I stared at the ceiling and made silent promises. I would protect my children. I would survive. And somehow I would stop him. The storm had begun, and I knew I could not run. I had to fight, quietly, smartly, without tipping him off. The next morning, I woke early, pretending life was normal. I made breakfast, packed the children's lunches, kissed them goodbye. But my heart was racing. I needed 3 things fast: money of my own, proof of Anthony's crime, and someone powerful enough to act against him. Back then, wives rarely had bank accounts. Men controlled everything. But I had a secret weapon, the small amounts of money I had saved from sewing over the years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I remembered one of my wealthiest clients, Mrs. Julia, a widowed rancher's wife. She liked me and often praised my talent. While I adjusted a dress for her niece's wedding, I said casually, "Anthony says we don't need our own accounts. He handles everything." Mrs. Eulalia gasped. "Nonsense, Gertrude. Every woman should have her own savings. I'll take you to my bank in Richmond tomorrow. Your husband and that Edward will never know." The next day we rode together to Richmond. My hands trembled as I signed the papers to open a small secret bank account. Into it I deposited the money I'd hidden for years, coins and bills earned one dress at a time. It wasn't much, but it felt like a lifeline, my first step toward independence. Next, I needed evidence, real, undeniable proof of what Anthony and Edward were planning. The tickets, letters, and fake IDs were helpful, but if caught snooping, I could be painted as a jealous wife, inventing lies. I needed official documents. Every morning, after Anthony left early for the bank, I slipped into his office. My heart pounded with fear that he might return suddenly. I handled every paper carefully, returning it exactly as it was. I used a tiny Kodak Instamatic camera I'd secretly bought in Richmond, small enough to hide among my fabrics. Click, click. Quiet pictures of transfer orders, false accounts, names of deceased clients whose money they had been stealing. But photos alone might not convince the authorities. I needed actual copies. Our town had only one stationery shop, owned by kind Mr. Moser. His wife was my client. His sons were in Michael's class. One day I went there with the story prepared. "Mr. Moser, I'm making a surprise album for Anthony's birthday, copies of important family papers. Could I use your copier?" He hesitated. "Mrs. Miller, I'm not supposed to let anyone use it without permission." I smiled gently. "It would mean so much. And I could make your wife a new dress for free." He sighed and finally agreed. That afternoon, with my hands shaking, I copied the most incriminating papers I could find: bank transfer slips, account numbers, notes in Edward's handwriting. I tucked the copies deep among my sewing materials where Anthony would never look. Now I had money and proof. But I still needed a champion, someone who could actually stop this heist and protect me. Our town sheriff played cards with Anthony. The judge was Michael's godfather. The priest heard Edward's confessions every week. Almost everyone in power was under their influence. But then I remembered Inspector Mendez, a tough, incorruptible man from the capital who sometimes inspects the bank. Anthony hated him, called him self-righteous. That was exactly the kind of man I needed. Through quiet gossip with the bank secretary, Mrs. Iwasima, I learned Mendez would be in town soon for a routine check. He'd stay 3 days at the little inn across from the square. I prepared an anonymous envelope, copies of the papers, photographs, and a letter explaining the scheme without naming myself. But how could I deliver it without anyone suspecting? Fate helped. My daughter Teresa had become friends with Marietta, the innkeeper's daughter. One afternoon, I invited Marietta to play and later walked Teresa to the inn. While chatting with Marietta's mother, I admired her purse and asked to borrow it to measure the strap for a dress I'm making. She gladly lent it. That evening, I returned the purse, now with my envelope hidden inside and a note asking her to quietly give it to Inspector Mendez when he arrived. My hands were shaking when I walked home that night, but my plan was moving forward. Next, I had to prepare for life after everything collapsed. If Anthony was arrested, I would lose the house and his income. A divorced mother with 2 kids in 1969 had few choices. I reached out to my childhood friend Louise, who lived in the capital and ran a small sewing studio. I didn't tell her everything, only that my marriage might end and I needed work. "Come here, Gertie," she said kindly. "I need help. There's a small room behind the studio where you and the kids can stay until you get on your feet." Knowing we had somewhere to run brought me strength. At home, I acted the part of the perfect wife. I cooked Anthony's favorite meals. I tucked the children in at night. But while he slept, I quietly packed important papers, small bundles of clothes, and cash in hidden spots. I calculated how long it would take to flee to the capital if danger came suddenly. The week before, the big transfer felt endless. Anthony was more nervous than usual, meeting Edward often, whispering on late-night phone calls. The air in the house was heavy with secrets. One night during dinner, Anthony looked at us strangely, long searching gazes at the children, almost sad. Gertrude, he said suddenly, we'll have to cancel that Sunday outing with the kids. Urgent work. My heart skipped. Was that when he planned to disappear? I smiled calmly. Of course, dear. The children will understand, won't they, Michael? Michael nodded, though he looked disappointed. Teresa played with her food, unaware of the silent war in the room. After dinner, Anthony stayed in his office with the door slightly ajar, unusual for him. Was it a trap? I approached carefully. Anthony, I said softly, I need some money to buy fabric. Mrs. Eulalia wants a new dress. He looked up, startled, then quickly handed me a thick wad of cash, far more than I asked. Buy something nice for yourself, too, he said. I forced a smile and left, heart racing. He had never been generous without reason. Was this guilt? A farewell gift? Hush money in advance? That night, I brushed my hair at the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Still only 29, but with eyes sharpened by fear and determination. The day before the transfer, Mrs. Erasima came by pretending to order a dress. While I took her measurements, she whispered, Inspector Mendez asked today for extra documents, transfers from the last 6 months. Your husband and Mr. Edward are white as paper. I almost collapsed with relief. Mendez had received my package. He was investigating, but the danger also grew. If Anthony suspected me, he might act before the plan unfolded. That evening, Anthony was quiet. Watching him eat soup, his gaze distant, I wondered if he was saying goodbye in his mind. A chill went through me. The morning of the big transfer arrived. The sky was clear and blue, mocking my storm of nerves. I dressed the children, made breakfast, and acted cheerful. Anthony checked his watch repeatedly. That'll work late, he said, avoiding my eyes. Don't wait for dinner. Any problem at the bank? I asked sweetly. Just bureaucracy, he said after a pause. Before leaving, he did something rare, kissed my cheek and hugged the kids long and hard. Michael looked puzzled. Teresa giggled, not understanding the strange mood. After they left, I prepared for anything. I hid documents, money, and small bags in case I had to run. I dropped the children at my sister-in-law Lucinda's house, pretending I needed peace to finish a big sewing order. If something went wrong, at least they would be safe. The day crawled. I shopped, cooked, sewed, all while feeling like my heart might break out of my chest. Every noise made me jump. Late afternoon, Mrs. Erasima returned briefly, pretending to try on her dress. She whispered urgently, police from the capital are at the bank. Inspector Mendez came with them. Mr. Edward is locked in a room with men in suits. Your husband tried to leave. They told him to stay. It was happening. My plan was working. But what would come next? Would Anthony guess my hand in it? Would the police believe me innocent? Would he try to hurt me if he escaped? I picked up the children from Lucinda's and took them back there for the night to finish sewing. Really, I wanted them safe. Then I waited alone in my silent house, dinner untouched, the clock ticking louder and louder. Around 8 p.m., sirens wailed in the distance. My chest tightened. Minutes later, 3 police cars sped down our street toward the town center. My hand shook so badly I had to grip the table. Half an hour later, pounding on my door made me jump. My heart stopped. Was it Anthony? The police? Someone else? I opened to find Lucinda, pale and breathless. Gertrude, have you heard? Anthony and Edward arrested. They tried to steal the textile factory's transfer money. It's a scandal. The whole town is in the square. I acted shocked, clutching the doorframe. No, there must be a mistake. No mistake, Lucinda said firmly, stepping inside. Inspector Mendez had evidence, documents, photos, everything. And she hesitated, looking at me with pity. And what? I whispered, though I already knew. They found tickets to Argentina. In Anthony's name. And a woman, Marianne, pregnant. Enrichment. I sank into a chair, covering my face. The pain was real even though I had known the truth. It's one thing to discover betrayal in secret, another to feel it explode in the public eye. Lucinda gripped my shoulders. What will you do now? What would I do? My mind whirled. My careful plan had worked. Anthony was stopped, the money saved, my life likely spared. But now came the aftermath: shame, gossip, survival. I looked at my sister-in-law's worried face. I thought of my children, asleep and safe at her house. And deep inside, beneath the fear and exhaustion, I felt something unexpected: relief. Anthony was gone, his lies exposed. For the first time in 10 years, the future, terrifying and unknown, was mine to shape. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Tomorrow the town would gossip. The police would want answers. The bank would take our home. My children would have questions I didn't yet know how to answer. I was free of Anthony's secret plan, but stepping into an entirely new battlefield? I was free of Anthony's secret plan, but stepping into an entirely new battlefield. The next morning, I woke up at my sister-in-law Lucinda's house. The children were still asleep, curled under blankets, unaware of how our lives had changed forever. I stared out the window and saw neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering, pointing. The scandal had spread overnight like wildfire. Our town had never seen anything like it. Anthony Miller, the respectable banker, arrested for stealing $500,000. The headlines called it the Bible heist. Reporters were driving in from Richmond and even Washington. The bank was shut down for an emergency audit. People were furious, frightened, curious, and all their eyes now turned toward me, the wife who must have known. Lucinda brought me coffee and spoke softly. "You don't have to go out today. Stay here until things calm down." But hiding would only make things worse. People would think I was guilty or ashamed. I had spent 10 years being silent. I wasn't going to start hiding now. I took a deep breath, bathed, and put on one of my best dresses, navy blue with tiny white dots I had sewn myself. I combed my hair, added a touch of lipstick, and held my head high. "I'm going to the market," I told Lucinda. She stared at me. "In the middle of this uproar?" "I have to. If I hide, they'll invent 100 stories about me." The walk to the market felt like walking through fire. Conversations stopped as I passed. Whispers followed me. "That's her." Did she know? Poor woman. I kept my back straight and my eyes calm. My hands trembled inside my purse, but I wouldn't let anyone see fear. At the butcher shop, silence fell when I entered. Women I had shared recipes with for years didn't know what to say. Finally, Mrs. Zulmora, the innkeeper, broke the ice. "Mrs. Miller, good to see you. You're brave to come out. Do you need help with the children?" Her kindness cracked the wall of gossip. I smiled, thanked her, bought fresh milk, and left with dignity. That small victory, just surviving that walk, gave me strength I hadn't known I had. But surviving gossip was only the first challenge. 3 days after the arrest, I received a summons. The Capitol's police wanted my statement. They needed to confirm I wasn't part of the theft. The thought of facing Anthony again terrified me, but there was no choice. I kissed Michael and Teresa, left them with Lucinda, and boarded the 5 a.m. bus to the Capitol. I wore a simple but elegant gray suit I had tailored myself the night before. My hands shook as the bus rattled down the road. I kept touching the photos of my children and the hand-embroidered handkerchief my late mother had given me. They were my talismans. At the police headquarters, I was led to a plain room. 3 men waited: Inspector Mendez, a stern-eyed prosecutor, and a clerk. Mendez greeted me kindly. "Mrs. Miller, we know you are not under accusation. We simply need your help to understand everything." They offered me coffee. I accepted, more to hide my trembling hands than because I was thirsty. The questions came, steady but polite. "Did you know about your husband's activities?" the prosecutor asked, looking over his glasses. "No, sir," I answered firmly. "I discovered everything by accident 2 weeks ago." I told them about the Bible note, about the fake trips, about finding the key and the metal box. I spoke of Marianne, the tickets, the false accounts, the ghost clients. I admitted I had gathered documents and photos, but I did not confess to being the anonymous informant who sent Mendez the evidence. Something in me wanted to keep that power quiet. The interview lasted almost 4 hours. They explained that Anthony and Edward had been siphoning small amounts for years using the accounts of the dead and elderly. The big transfer was to be their final, life-changing theft. I asked what would happen to us. Your house was financed by the bank, the prosecutor said gently. It may be reclaimed to cover losses. Your husband faces 8 to 10 years in prison. And the other woman? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Mindy's and the prosecutor exchanged glances. Marianne Olivia denies knowing about the theft. She says she believed Mr. Miller was divorcing you and would marry her. She is 7 months pregnant. Unless evidence shows she helped the crime, she will not be charged. A strange feeling tugged at me, not jealousy anymore, but a quiet, bitter pity. She too had been deceived. Before I left, Mendez asked to speak privately. His voice softened. We received an anonymous tip, documents, photos, everything. That tip saved lives, Mrs. Miller. It stopped a crime that would have ruined families. It may have saved you. I met his eyes but said nothing. He handed me his card. If you ever need help, call me. You are braver than you know. I returned home that night exhausted but strangely calm. A chapter had ended. I had faced the law and survived. Now came the hardest part, building a new life from the ruins. Days later, an official letter arrived. The bank would repossess our house within 30 days. Everything I had built, the garden where the children played, the kitchen where I cooked countless meals, would be gone. But instead of despair, I felt almost relieved. That house had been a cage of secrets. I had to explain everything gently to Michael and Teresa. Daddy made some very bad choices, I told them one evening. We sat close together on Lucinda's sofa. He's going to prison for a long time. But what happened has nothing to do with how much he loves you. Teresa's big eyes filled with tears. Doesn't he love us anymore? Sweetheart, love doesn't erase mistakes. Daddy's choices were wrong, and now he must face them. But Mommy is here, and I'll take care of you. Michael, older and more serious, stayed quiet for a long time. Can I see him? He asked softly. When it's safe and possible, yes, I promised. It was the hardest promise I've ever made. Meanwhile, our small town buzzed with gossip. Some so-called friends distanced themselves. Others surprised me with kindness, bringing meals, giving sewing jobs, offering clothes for the children. I learned quickly who truly cared. I called Louise in the capital. I'm coming, I said simply. We have nowhere else to go. You have me, she replied. Come and bring the kids. I began packing a few clothes, important papers, my sewing tools. I sold or gave away what furniture I could. On moving day, I dressed Michael and Teresa in their best, held their hands, and walked out of that house for the last time. I didn't feel sadness, just a strange, quiet relief. At the bus station, familiar faces came to say goodbye. Lucinda hugged the children and whispered promises to visit. Kind Mrs. Eulalia pressed an envelope into my palm, a small loan to help me start over. I squeezed her hand with silent gratitude. The ride to the Capitol took 4 hours, but felt like crossing into a new universe. Michael stared out the window, fascinated by the rising city buildings. Teresa fell asleep in my lap. I watched my reflection in the glass, a 29-year-old woman, officially alone, carrying 2 children in an uncertain future. And yet, for the first time in years, I felt free. Louise met us at the station with open arms and a warm smile. Welcome to your new life, she said simply. She showed us to the tiny room behind her sewing studio, just one bed for the 3 of us, a small wardrobe, a shared bathroom down the hall. It was humble, but it was safe. She'd even placed fresh flowers in a vase. I could have cried from gratitude. That first night, after the children finally fell asleep, I sat on the back porch and looked at the city lights. Everything was strange and noisy, but I felt peace for the first time in a decade. I whispered to myself, you are alive. You are free. Now build something new. Life was not easy. By day, I worked long hours at Louise's studio, altering dresses and hemming trousers. At night, When the children slept, I sketched new designs, dreaming of building my own clientele. Money was painfully tight. Sometimes I ate only bread and tea so the children could have better meals. But slowly, things improved. Louise introduced me to clients who loved my neat stitches and elegant but practical style. Word of mouth grew. Women began to ask specifically for Mrs. Miller's work. Michael and Teresa adapted to the city's public school, a big change from their small-town classrooms. Michael buried himself in books and numbers. Teresa filled sketchbooks with drawings. Watching them adjust gave me strength. Anthony's trial came quickly. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Edward, seen as the mastermind, got longer. When the newspaper printed the verdict, I showed Michael and Teresa. People pay for their choices, I said. Even people we love. Can we visit him? Michael asked again. Yes, I said softly. He's still your father. I wanted them to understand accountability without erasing love. Our first prison visit was wrenching. Anthony looked thin and tired in his uniform. Teresa cried through most of it. Michael stared in silence, trying to reconcile the man before him with the father he remembered. Anthony tried to explain, to apologize, but his words felt hollow. I said little. Some wounds go too deep for quick forgiveness. Yet life went on. With time and hard work, I saved enough to rent a tiny 2-bedroom apartment near the children's school. It was small and furnished with second-hand pieces, but it was ours. I sewed cheerful curtains. The kids painted their own room. We built a new home from scratch. By 1971, 2 years after the arrest, my small reputation as a seamstress had grown. I was 31, tired, but stronger than ever. For the first time, I felt control over my destiny. And then, one rainy October afternoon, the past knocked on my door. I was finishing a graduation dress for a client when 10-year-old Michael answered the door. "Mom," he called nervously, "there's a lady with a baby." I wiped my hands and walked to the door. Standing there, soaked from the rain, was Mary Ann, the woman Anthony had betrayed me with. She looked thinner, pale, exhausted. In her arms slept a baby boy about 10 months old. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. All the anger and hurt I had buried rose like a tide. How dare she appear after destroying my family? But then I looked at the baby, chubby cheeks, soft eyelashes, just like Michael's had been. An innocent child. "Come in," I said quietly. "You're soaked." Michael and Teresa watched, confused. I asked Michael to fetch a towel and Teresa to heat water for tea. Soon Mary Ann sat on my worn sofa, drying the baby. "His name is Charles," she whispered. 10 months old. She sipped tea with trembling hands. When the children left the room, she began to speak in a rush, as if a dam had burst. "I lost everything, Mrs. Miller. The house was in Anthony's name. After the scandal, I was evicted. I went back to my parents in Norfolk, but when Charles was born, my father called him a bastard and threw us out. I tried to find teaching work, but doors closed when people learned my story. Anthony promised to take care of us when he got out. He said we'd start over. But last week, I got this." She handed me a crumpled letter. I recognized Anthony's handwriting instantly. "Mary Ann, circumstances have changed. I can't support you and the boy. It's better we go separate ways. Take care, Anthony." I handed the letter back silently. I wasn't surprised. It was exactly the man I had known, charming when he wanted, heartless when it cost him something. "I have nowhere left to go," she said, tears spilling. "I'm sleeping in cheap inns. My money's gone. I'm not asking for charity, just work. I can clean, help with customers, anything." I looked at her, so young, desperate, carrying a child who shared my children's blood. She too had been deceived and discarded. I had discovered the truth in time. She hadn't. "Do you know sewing?" I asked. No, but I'm organized. I was a teacher. I can keep records, help with clients." I took a long, steady breath. Helping her would be scandalous. Neighbors would gossip forever. I looked at the sleeping baby and thought of Michael and Teresa. This was their brother. And maybe helping Mary Ann was also a way to heal my own wounds. "I have a small room in the back. I said slowly. It's just storage now, but you can sleep there with the baby. And I need help with bookkeeping and customers. The pay isn't much, but you'll have meals and a roof. Her eyes widened with disbelief and relief. You take me in? After everything? I'm not doing it for you, I answered honestly. I'm doing it for the child and maybe a little for myself. It's time to let go of some anger. That night, after Marianne and baby Charles settled into the little back room, I gathered Michael and Teresa. I explained gently, the baby is your brother, your father's son with another woman. She needs help, and we are going to help. Michael frowned. Is she the woman Dad left us for? Yes, but she was also deceived like us, and the baby is innocent. Teresa, only 8, shrugged. Can I play with him when he's bigger? Of course, sweetheart. At first it was awkward. Marianne barely met my eyes, embarrassed and grateful. The children were shy. Neighbors whispered when they saw us shopping together. The betrayed wife and the mistress under one roof, a story made for gossip. But slowly, life found a rhythm. Marianne had a gift for organization. Within days, she reorganized my studio, scheduled clients efficiently, kept the books tidy. That freed me to focus on design and sewing. Orders increased. Money improved. The children adjusted faster than I expected. Teresa adored baby Charles and took the role of big sister with pride. Michael, though quieter, often helped Marianne when he saw her struggling. Some nights, after the children slept, Marianne and I sat in the kitchen talking softly. 2 women tied by the same man's betrayal, now rebuilding their lives side by side. She asked how I discovered the truth. I told her about the Bible, the notes, the secret investigation. She listened, wide-eyed. You were the anonymous informant, she said finally. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Months passed, our small home studio flourished. Clients loved our work. We saved enough to move into a slightly bigger apartment with 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for the girls, one for Michael and little Charles. Life was far from easy, but it was safe, ours, and growing. Then, one afternoon in late 1972, the doorbell rang. The man standing there froze my blood. Edward, the bank manager, the man whose handwriting had once told my husband to kill me. The man standing there froze my blood. Edward, the bank manager, the man whose handwriting had once told my husband to kill me. For a heartbeat, I almost shut the door. All of fear flared up like fire. But then I remembered who I had become. I was no longer the quiet, frightened wife. I was a businesswoman, a survivor. I had built a life from ashes. I straightened my back and opened the door wider. Mr. Edward, I said evenly. Come in. He stepped inside, looking nothing like the polished banker I had once known. Prison had aged him. His suit hung loose, his hair was almost white, and there were deep shadows under his eyes. He refused the coffee I offered and stood awkwardly in my modest living room. I was released 3 days ago, he said quietly. Reduced sentence for good behavior. I needed to see you. I folded my hands, waiting. I came to ask forgiveness, he said, staring at the floor. I know I don't deserve it. You probably hate me. The note, what you found, was Anthony's idea. He feared you'd discover everything about Marianne and the money. He said it was just a precaution, that it would never be used. I believed him, or maybe I wanted to. Why tell me this now? I asked, keeping my voice calm even as my heart pounded. Because I spent years in a cell thinking about what we almost did. Anthony still blames everyone but himself. But I can't live with this weight anymore. You deserved none of it. I studied his face. Gone was the smug banker. In front of me stood a broken man, full of regret. What will you do now? I asked. Go south to my brother's small business. Try to live honestly. I know I can never fix what I did, but I want to at least stop running from it. He rose to leave, but paused at the door. Your courage saved many people, Gertrude, not just you and your children. If we had stolen that money, the textile factory wouldn't have opened. Families would have lost jobs. You saved this town more than it knows. When he was gone, I sat for a long time, staring at the closed door. Old memories flooded back, the fear, the betrayal, The night I planned to survive, yet mixed with them was something unexpected, relief. The man who once wrote kill her had come to me seeking forgiveness. I didn't forgive, not fully, but I felt lighter. I didn't tell Marianne but the children about his visit. Some ghosts didn't need to live with us. By 1973, life was unrecognizable from the ruins I had fled. Our small sewing business had steady clients. Michael, now 12, excelled at school, especially in science. Teresa, 10, filled sketchbooks with beautiful dress ideas. Little Charles, almost 3, toddled around our studio, charming every customer. One day, a wealthy fabric shop owner, Mrs. Caraway, came for a fitting. She loved my work. "You should have your own boutique," she told me. "You have the talent. I have capital and contacts. We could partner." The idea thrilled and terrified me. A real boutique meant risk, bigger bills, more exposure. "I'll think about it," I said, hiding my shaking hands. That night I shared the news with Marianne. We were sitting at the small kitchen table after the kids slept. "It's risky," she said thoughtfully. She had become cautious with money after losing everything. "But it's also the chance we've waited for. If we succeed, the children can have a better future." We stayed up late with pencils and paper, scribbling numbers, dreaming a little. In the end, we said yes. Mrs. Caraway was delighted. She had already rented a vacant shop on Madison Avenue. It needed work, but had potential. We threw ourselves into transforming it. Marianne, surprisingly talented at design, decorated the space with elegance on a tight budget. We hired 2 part-time seamstresses for basic work so I could focus on high-end custom pieces. The grand opening was small but beautiful. Cheap champagne and borrowed glasses, snacks we made ourselves. Michael, serious in a tiny suit, greeted guests. Teresa handed out lavender-scented sachets we had sewn as gifts. Little Charles smiled at everyone from Marianne's arms, melting hearts. I looked around that night and nearly cried. Only 4 years earlier, I had been a scared wife holding a death threat in my hand. Now I stood in my own boutique, surrounded by people who loved me. The past still hurt, but I was alive and thriving. The boutique, Atelier Gertrude, slowly flourished. Wealthy brides came for my wedding gowns. Society ladies wanted my evening dresses. Marianne handled the books, scheduling, and customer service brilliantly. She had found her strength, too. Some in the city whispered about us, the betrayed wife and the former mistress running a business together. Some found it scandalous. Others admired our courage. Most were too busy with their own dramas to care. We didn't mind. We were too busy growing, working, and raising our children. By 1975, we had moved from Madison Avenue to a larger, more elegant shop on Park Avenue. Our name was in fashion columns. One of my gowns was featured in a women's magazine, my first time seeing elegance by Gertrude in glossy print. I framed that page and hung it proudly. At home, our little unconventional family blossomed. Michael was a studious teen, dreaming of engineering. Teresa grew into an artistic young girl with an eye for fashion. Charles, 5, was happy and full of laughter. We lived in a spacious townhouse with a small garden and a backyard studio for my quieter workdays. We even had help, 2 kind maids, something I'd never imagined back in those dark early days. Life finally felt calm, safe. And then, one summer afternoon in 1976, the past came back again. I was adjusting a graduation gown for a client when our receptionist stepped in nervously. "Mrs. Miller, there's a man here. He says he's Mr. Anthony Miller." The pen slipped from my hand and pricked my finger. A tiny drop of blood appeared, but I hardly felt it. Anthony. Released from prison. I had known the day would come, but knowing and being ready are different things. "Tell him I'm busy," I said automatically. A reflex: hide, avoid, protect. But then I looked in the mirror at myself, a successful business owner, a woman who had built a life without him. Why should I hide now? I had faced worse. "No," I told the receptionist. "Ask him to wait. I'll be there in 15 minutes." I finished the fitting with calm hands, though inside, my heart pounded. Then I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and went to the reception area. There he sat, stiff and awkward in one of our chic armchairs. Prison had changed him. His hair was white, his shoulders slumped. His suit was clean, but outdated. He looked like a man out of place in our polished feminine world. "Gertrude," he said, rising. "Anthony," I replied evenly. "Come to my office." We walked through the boutique. My employees glanced curiously. They knew parts of my story. Seeing the infamous ex-husband was like seeing a ghost. My office was simple but elegant, decorated with Teresa's framed sketches and my business contracts. I sat behind my desk, a position of quiet power I could never have imagined years ago. "You've built something impressive," he said softly, glancing around. "What do you want, Anthony?" I asked, direct and calm. He swallowed. "To see the children." I said nothing, just looked at him. "I was released a week ago," he continued. "I'm staying at a boarding house nearby. Michael must be 15 now. Teresa 13. They're not the little ones I left." "They aren't," I said. He hesitated then. "Thank you for the letters and photos you sent over the years. For keeping me connected." I nodded slightly. Though it cost me, I had always kept my promise to keep the children linked to their father. I sent photos, school reports, let them visit when they wanted. I believe kids deserve to know the truth, but not be poisoned by hate. "I want to see Charles too," he added, surprising me. I stiffened. "Charles, the son you abandoned in a letter?" Shame colored his face. I was desperate, Gertrude. I thought disappearing would make things easier for everyone. But prison gave me too much time to think. I studied him carefully. Gone was the charming liar. Before me was a tired, smaller man. Was this regret real? Or just another manipulation? I couldn't tell, but I didn't feel afraid anymore. "I can't decide for Marianne about Charles," I said finally. "As for Michael and Teresa, they're almost grown. It's their choice." He nodded. "That's fair." Then almost shyly, "Are you with someone now?" I raised an eyebrow. "My personal life is none of your business. It hasn't been since the day I found that note." He lowered his head. "You're right. I just wanted to know if you found happiness." "I'm happy despite you, not because of you," I said quietly, and felt the truth of it settle like peace. Anthony blinked, then nodded. "I deserve that." When he left, I stood at the window and watched him walk away, shoulders bent, a man shrunk by his own choices. I felt no hate, no fear, only distance. That evening, I gathered our family in the living room. Michael, now tall and serious, Teresa, artistic and bright, Marianne, tense and silent, little Charles playing on the floor. "Your father is out of prison," I said plainly. "He came today. He wants to see you." Michael crossed his arms. "I have nothing to say to him," he said firmly. He had long since stopped visiting and poured himself into studies. Teresa bit her lip, eyes wet. "Did he ask about me?" "He asked about both of you," I said gently. "The decision is yours." Marianne stared at the floor, her hands tight. Even after all these years, Anthony's name wounded her. "He wants to see Charles?" she asked. "Yes." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "After the letter he sent? Why now?" "He says prison changed him. That he regrets." A heavy silence filled the room. Everyone sat with their memories, their anger, their hurt. Finally, Teresa spoke. "I'll meet him. Not for him, for me. I need to know." Michael shook his head. "I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be." Marianne's jaw tightened. She stared at little Charles playing with blocks. "If he wants to know his son, it will be on my terms. Clear rules. No empty promises." The following weeks turned our usually peaceful home into an emotional storm. Teresa met Anthony first at a cafe near the boutique. They spoke for 2 hours. When she returned, her face was pale but calm. "He cried when I showed him my sketches," she told me. "Said he always knew I'd be an artist. I feel strange. Not angry. just sad for what could have been. Michael refused to meet. He buried himself deeper in schoolwork and science projects. At 15, he talked passionately about MIT and engineering. His resolve was steel. Marianne arranged to meet Anthony in a public park with Charles. I stayed away, of course, but that night, as we drank tea on the porch, she told me. Charles didn't know who he was, just played with his toy car, she said softly. Anthony kept saying how much he looks like Michael at that age. He apologized. Offered money for Charles's future. Did you accept? I asked. She shook her head firmly. No, I told him we don't need his charity. You and I built this life. But I agreed. He could see Charles occasionally, if it's healthy for the boy. After that, Anthony became a quiet presence. Some Sundays he took Teresa to lunch or Charles to the zoo. Michael kept his distance but listened when Teresa returned with stories. I stayed polite but detached. The man who once terrified me no longer had power over my life. Our boutique continued to thrive. We opened a second shop in one of the first shopping malls, a new concept at the time. By 1978, we were invited to show a small collection at the early version of what would become New York Fashion Week. My heart nearly burst seeing my gowns under bright city lights. Michael graduated top of his class and was accepted into MIT, his dream. Teresa entered the Rhode Island School of Design determined to bring fresh creativity to our fashion line. Charles, growing up surrounded by sewing machines and laughter, showed an early knack for business. At just 7, he loved counting money and arranging fabrics by price. Anthony, meanwhile, lived modestly. He found work as an accountant in a small firm. The grand life he once chased was gone forever. At school graduations and important events, he came quietly, sat apart but present. We coexisted politely for the children's sake. I thought the story had finally settled, but life has a way of circling back. It was 1980, 11 years after I found that deadly note in the Bible. I was in my studio fitting a wedding dress when my assistant came in. Mrs. Miller, there's a couple asking for you specifically. I wiped my hands and walked to reception. Standing there was Edward, older now but healthier than when I'd last seen him. Beside him was a gentle-looking woman with a shy smile. Mrs. Miller, he said nervously. This is Helena, my fiancé. We're getting married next month. I blinked, surprised. I hadn't seen him since his visit after prison. We want a simple wedding, Helena said kindly. Edward told me about his past. About you. I know it's a lot to ask, but would you consider making my dress? I looked at the man who had once helped plan my death, now asking for help to celebrate love. The irony was sharp. Years ago, I would have slammed the door. But now, I was no longer ruled by hate. Come, I said gently to Helena. Let's talk about your dream dress. And just like that, life proved it could twist in ways no one could imagine. Life has a way of surprising you just when you think the story is finished. Helping Helena choose her wedding dress was one of those unexpected surprises. I had imagined that if I ever faced Edward again, I would feel only anger or bitterness. But standing in my studio, measuring his fiancée for lace sleeves and listening to her shy excitement, I felt something different, peace. The past was heavy, but I was no longer carrying it. It had become a part of me, yes, but not the part that ruled me. Edward came alone one afternoon to approve the final sketch. He looked uncomfortable, twisting his hat in his hands. I didn't think you'd say yes, he admitted quietly. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. But then I realized refusing wouldn't change the past. And helping wouldn't erase what happened, but add something better to the future. He nodded, his eyes shining with quiet gratitude. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known, Gertrude. I smiled faintly. Strength, I thought, is just what grows when you've survived too much to stay small. By 1981, our boutique, now called Atelier Gertrude and Marianne, was thriving. We had 2 stores and a growing reputation for elegant custom gowns. Brides came not just from our city, but from neighboring states. We even shipped a few dresses to New York and Chicago. Teresa, now in her early 20s, returned from the Rhode Island School of Design brimming with creativity. She redesigned our ready-to-wear line, making it youthful and fresh while keeping the timeless elegance our clients loved. She signed her drawings T. Miller with a little heart. Seeing her name on hang tags made me teary every time. Michael, deep into his engineering degree at MIT, called home often. He was brilliant and serious, but also warm. He sent postcards from Boston with little notes like, "For your next dress, Mom, this bridge is stunning." I smiled each time, amazed by the boy who once clung to me in fear, now building structures stronger than steel. Charles was a lively little boy, curious and clever. Though he knew Anthony was his father, his true daily family was us, me, Marianne, Michael, and Teresa. He loved helping in the boutique, counting buttons or arranging ribbons by color. Customers adored him. Marianne had become more than my partner. She was my sister in every way that mattered. We shared a home, responsibilities, laughter, and late-night tea after exhausting workdays. People sometimes whispered about our unusual household, but we had long ago stopped caring. We were building something solid and kind, and gossip couldn't touch that. Anthony stayed on the edges of our lives. After prison, he worked quietly as an accountant for a small firm. He rented a modest apartment and seemed content to keep a low profile. He attended graduations and birthdays when invited, bringing thoughtful but simple gifts, a book, a drawing kit, a science model. He never regained the charm or confidence he once wielded. Prison had stripped away his illusions, a sense genuine regret, but also resignation. He never asked for more than polite contact with the children, and I respected that boundary. Michael remained distant but civil. He didn't attend father-son outings, but would nod politely if they crossed paths at family events. Teresa kept a delicate connection, coffee every few months, letters sometimes. Charles, still young, treated him like a kindly but unfamiliar uncle. I too kept things civil. No hatred, no warmth, just the quiet peace of someone who had moved on long ago. In 1983, an opportunity arrived that would once have terrified me. A national department store chain invited us to design a small bridal collection under our name. It would mean mass production, a very different world from our bespoke gowns, but also the chance to reach thousands of brides who could never afford custom work. Marianne and I debated late into the night. Could we manage the business side? Would we lose our soul? Teresa, sitting cross-legged on the floor with sketches everywhere, said, "We can keep the heart, Mom. We just have to build it carefully." We took the leap. The line launched in 1984 and was a success. Suddenly, Atelier Gertrude and Marianne wasn't just a boutique, it was a brand. Our name appeared in magazines and department store ads. Orders poured in. We hired more staff. We moved our headquarters to a beautiful brick building with high windows and cutting tables bathed in natural light. I often thought back to the little sewing machine on my kitchen table in 1969, how far we had come. Michael graduated summa cum laude and joined a large engineering firm. Later, he started his own construction company, designing sustainable, elegant buildings. He married a kind-hearted architect named Elaine, and together they built a life full of creativity and respect. They gave me my first grandchild, little Sophie, who loved playing with fabric scraps in my studio. Teresa became my full creative partner. She had a natural eye for trends and an artist's soul. She eventually led our ready-to-wear lines while I focused on couture gowns. She never married, but she filled her life with art, travel, and love for family. Sometimes she said, "Mom, I have everything I need, work that matters, and people I adore." Charles grew into a brilliant businessman. He went to business school and then returned to manage the company side of our brand. Calm, thoughtful, and charming. He balanced Teresa's artistic vision and my love for craftsmanship. He married young and had 2 children, Leo and Grace, who filled our house with laughter. Watching these 3 become who they were meant to be healed, parts of me I didn't know were still hurting. Anthony's health began to decline in the early 1990s. Heart problems, the doctor said. When he suffered a sudden attack in 1995, the children and I went to the hospital. It felt strange, sitting by his bed, a man who once plotted a future without us, yet somehow remained a piece of our story. He looked at me with tired eyes. "Gertrude, I know sorry isn't enough." I didn't offer false comfort. "I know you regret," I said softly. And that's something. He turned to Michael and Teresa and Charles, who stood awkwardly nearby. I'm proud of you. All of you. Even if I don't deserve to be. He died a few days later. The funeral was small. We all attended not for lost love, but for history, for the threads that connected us despite everything. Marianne stood beside me, our hands brushing. Life is complicated, and sometimes compassion is the only way to move on. Our empire of stitches the following years were full of work, family, and growth. Our brand expanded nationally. Teresa's designs gained attention in major magazines. Charles negotiated clever partnerships. Michael's construction firm even built one of our flagship stores. Marianne and I remained the quiet foundation of it all, two women who had once been enemies, now bound as sisters and business partners. We laugh sometimes about the past. Imagine, she'd say, sipping tea. If someone had told me in 1969 that I'd spend my life with the wife of the man I loved, I'd have called them mad. We'd both laugh, shaking our heads at life's strange turns. We traveled together, Paris for fabrics, New York for shows, even Italy once to learn about lace. We built a warm, unconventional home where grandchildren ran between bolts of silken mannequins. I watched our children thrive and felt a deep, quiet pride. Not because life was perfect, it wasn't, but because we had built something true from rubble. I stayed in touch with Edward more than I expected. After making Helena's dress, he wrote me a heartfelt letter of thanks. They married quietly and moved south. Occasionally, a card would arrive with a photo, their small hardware shop, their modest but happy life. It was strange and somehow comforting to know that even people who fail terribly can rebuild with honesty. Once, years later, Edward wrote, "You gave me back my dignity when you could have crushed me. I hope you know how much that meant." I cried when I read it. Forgiveness, I realized, is sometimes less about the other person and more about freeing yourself. By the early 2000s, I retired officially. Teresa and Charles took over the company, now a respected fashion house with bridal lines in major cities. Michael's firm built remarkable eco-friendly buildings across the country. Our family gathered often, birthdays, graduations, little celebrations just because. My 6 grandchildren filled my later years with joy. They loved hearing stories about sewing, about courage, about the strange path that brought our family together. One day, Teresa said, "Mom, you should share these stories beyond us. Other women need to hear them." That's how the idea for Grandma's Diary began, my small way of telling hard-earned lessons to anyone who might need them. I sit here now at 78, remembering the frightened young wife I once was. She found a terrible note, Yale. She discovers the truth, kill her. She thought her life was ending. Instead, it was beginning. That note forced me to wake up. It pushed me to fight, to build, to become the woman I am. It taught me that even betrayal and fear can be turned into strength. So, my dears, if you're listening today, maybe you're facing your own storm. Maybe something has broken your heart or shattered the life you thought was safe. I want to tell you this, it's not the end. It might be the very beginning. Sometimes a door slams shut, so we're forced to find one that leads somewhere better. Sometimes we have to be broken open to become who we were meant to be. Look at me, a scared 29-year-old with no bank account, 2 children, and a husband who planned to abandon her. I built a company, raised a loving family, forgave where I could, and created a life full of meaning. You can rebuild too. Thank you for staying with me through this long, winding story. If it touched your heart, please leave a like. It helps more people find these stories. Subscribe to Grandma's Diary so you don't miss the next chapter of courage and survival. And tell me in the comments,